So good afternoon, Jim. I'm here with James Lafferty at British American Tobacco. He's CEO of BAT in the Philippines, and you're former CEO of Coca-Cola in Nigeria. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was Kenya, but it's Nigeria. No? And then also you were CEO of P&G here in the Philippines as well. So quite amazing career track record that you have there.
I think there's a lot of people that have worked in different good companies. I'm proud of is to work for high quality companies and have a value system and have a reputation for excellence in the market, excellence in their culture.
Fantastic. I'm really honored to be here with you today. And thanks very much for opening yourself up to being interviewed and contributing to the next book, which will be a book by leaders for leaders, and will be based on this one, which is my first book. It's not yet published, but soon to be published. It's called Develop Exponential Power. And I'm asking you to maybe share about one or two of the principles in here. And you mentioned earlier you might want to talk about integrity or courage or humility. Either one of those will actually work for me. So which one would you want to start with?
Well, I think as you go through the 28 power principles, they all make sense. There's certainly some that resonate with the individual more than others, and those would be three of the ones that I think I have a breadth of personal life experience with that would enable me to talk about them. I mean, why don't we start with integrity?
Great, fantastic.
As you say, they all touch on each other. So.
They do. They sort of have an impact on each other. Yeah, so integrity, I was really inspired by when you shared with me in the past about what you've done in Nigeria. It was mainly a lot about corruption, but to me it was also more than that. It was more about bringing integrity into the space. Maybe can you share with us the background of what happened in your life there, and then what?
Well, when people say you're a general manager or a CEO, they think that the jobs are all the same, and there's different elements of the job depending on where you are. When I landed in Nigeria, I was the CEO of Coca-Cola there, but if you look at where the time was spent, I was 30% really fighting corruption. That was a third of my time.
Yes, wow.
And that's something that a CEO in the United States or a CEO in Western Europe would never be able to relate to. That it's so important and so critical that you would spend a third of your time. So 2 days a week or something was spent doing nothing but working on corruption.
That's a good
and the reason for that is the impact that corruption has on a company. The culture was in horrible shape. In the Coca-Cola system, they do a survey of employee engagement, how much employees are really into their job.
Yes.
We were the lowest in the world at about, it was under 30% engagement in Coca-Cola Nigeria. So you had basically 70% of your employees that didn't even care. That's what corruption can do, because they see things happening, they see fellow employees graft and kickbacks and bribes and make money-making schemes and defacing the company and saying the company doesn't care, the company lets this go on. I don't care, and it spreads like a cancer. It also impacts your P&L. I mean, I showed many times a very famous slide in Coca-Cola where I showed we were twice the size of Pepsi. We charged 20% more, and we made half the profit. So how do you make sense of that?
So that's a significant impact.
You basically say, I sell more, I charge more, and I make less. But the problem, the money is going somewhere, and part of the answer to that is the money was going out through, a systemic corruption inside the company. And now some people get very upset with that. They don't like to hear that. They say, we have to prove the facts. But how do you prove the facts of the depth of corruption? I mean, it's very difficult. The governments can't prove it, let alone corporations. So the fact of the matter is that was a belief we had. I had independent, studies done on that by, outside security companies, and they had an assessment, and the assessments were massive sums of money. So for all the right reasons, that became a priority, and it took many different forms. And the first form it takes is setting a personal example. And, Nigeria is a place where, there's opportunities. And I've seen some of the richest people I've ever met there. So you tell people Nigeria, they think this poor African country, it's very affluent. It has a very affluent population to it. It has lots of opportunities, and the pricing is very high. A hotel that costs in the Philippines 5,000 pesos a night will be 15 or 20,000 pesos a night in Nigeria. It's a very expensive place to live. If you look at all the lists of the most expensive cities in the world, Lagos will always pop up in the top 10, top 15. It's very, very expensive. So there's lots of money to be made there, and there's lots of means of making it in non-honorable means. And during my time in Coke, and knowing that there's no secrets, and during my time in Coke, I had multiple opportunities to take bribes or to partake in corrupt activity.
Yes.
And I made it a public thing to say no, because I wanted my people to know that their leader, whilst telling people to be honest, actually did it. And I think that was part of the problem in the country. You had political leaders telling the population, let's be honest and honorable, while everyone knew they were taking. I mean, how do these people live the lifestyle they live if you take their government salary? I mean, the math doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so it was important that my people understood that, I respected and valued the company's money. I spent the company's money as I spent my own. And that I didn't partake of things. And the word leaks out. People gossip about their leaders. And they want to understand, they talk stuff. And so, you want them to hear things. They would see, they knew about even little stuff I did, like flying economy class and not business class. They knew this because they were used to, the managing director is treated like a king. He's put on, he's put in the seats. And, I in fact had a massive fight with the board of directors of Coke. It was an independently traded company on the stock exchange. We had a board of directors. We had a meeting in Athens, and all the board came to me and said, we want to be put in first class. And I said, absolutely not. And they said, well, that's part of our board. And I said, no, I'm not paying. I'm not doing it. We're trying to save money and send a signal. And then I put a bunch of board people in, not just in business, in first. And, they got very upset. And we had a huge argument in the board meeting. And I said, look, we're not where we need to be. We're trying to send a signal. And here we're showing extravagance. And it's a 6-hour overnight flight. Business class is good enough. And I said, and so they argue with me. And I said, well, how do you feel? How do you feel that you'll be sitting in business and myself and other board members will be sitting in the back of the plane? And that was the point that kind of shocked a bit the board. But until that point in time, it was a huge argument. It was about setting an example and doing the right thing. So, and I admit, there was one bribe attempt in Nigeria that I'm ashamed, and I've always been ashamed to say, it took me a day to say no. Because the number's so big that you actually catch your breath. I mean, if I go through the course of my career in Central and Eastern Europe and, in the Middle East and Africa and Asia, I've been in lots of developing markets. I've had multiple, these subtle, if you were to help us, we would, these kind of things. Turning down $100,000 or $10,000, this is easy. I mean, it takes nothing.
Yes.
But when you're talking about numbers that are exponentially bigger than that, you suddenly do, you still have to ask yourself the question, are my principles for sale? And if they are, what's the price? And you actually have to think about it for once. And, that it always reminds me of the story they tell about Winston Churchill. He was sitting at dinner with a woman, they were arguing about principle. He said, let me ask you a question. Would you sleep with me for £1 million? And she said, yes. And he said, okay. Would you sleep with me for £1? And she said, oh my God, what kind of woman do you think I am? And he said, well, I think that's already been established. Now we're just negotiating the price. And, I've never forgotten that tale. And you find out when someone puts a huge sum of money, a life-changing sum of money in front of your face, then you find out what your principles are.
That's so true.
And I admit that it was painful, but I knew that the people wanted to know that their leader, if I was going to demand honesty and honor from my people, I had to live by example. I mean, that's the essence of leadership. You don't ask people to do what you're not prepared to do. And so, if you look at military history, great leaders led from the front. They don't sit in the back tents and say, hey, go attack, and hopefully I'll be praying for you. I mean, they got to be at the front of the front of the attack.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
that was step one, was setting example. Step two was going after it. And these were organized cabals, mafias. It's a mafia. It's a mafia, highly organized. It's not as structured as we might consider the term mafia, but it was organized between people with agreements on cuts and how they would do it, how they would circumvent the system. Highly organized, typically tribal. Nigeria is not really a national country, it's a collection of multiple tribes. Nigeria is a British creation. It's not something that evolved out of Africa. It was someone sitting and drawing lines on a map and making it that, people are not Nigerian first, they're Nigerian second after the tribe. A lot of the cabals were set on tribal grounds. And so if you were to violate it or not participate, there could be huge implications for your family within the tribal context. So the amount of peer pressure, at least at worst, ignore it. At best case, you might participate or you might turn a blind eye. It depends on the situation. They were highly organized and they were stealing money in a systemic way through, defrauding numbers. They were stealing the fuel from the tanks. It started with not recording it, then lying about the inventory in the tank, then lying about losses. There was a whole group of people that would be involved in that. The theft of like our gasoline or a sugar truck would be hijacked and disappear. Yeah, so we did polygraph testing on people in specific cases where we had information. We went and we attacked every single case of fraud, no matter how high it was, and I'm not proud of it, but I put 168 people in jail in my first year there.
Wow.
And I believe in you need to make an example of people. They don't just get off. And when we sent someone to jail, we sent a blast email to all 6,000 employees, and we showed their picture. And we said, just to let you know, this person was convicted in court for this theft of company assets, and they will spend 1 year in hard labor. We would put the case, and very factual, no value judgments, no this. We didn't label the person. We said this individual was convicted of this crime on this date, and we went off.
What was the impact of that?
It was huge. People saw that. It's important to show that nobody's above the law. I went after the people that upset me the most were expats and high-ranking people. They were the ones that upset me the most because they're given very high salaries and they're entrusted with ethical responsibility to be stewards of the business.
So it wasn't just...
There's a difference between a technician in a plant and a very senior, senior managers. I told all the expats when I got there, I said, let me be really clear about stuff. I am going to polygraph all of you. And just to be really clear, if you get caught, it's not that you get to go home without a job. I will lock you in jail here. You will check into a 5-star Nigerian prison where they will probably have their way with you every day. You're not getting out. And one of my expats, it was literally a race to the airport. He literally packed his wife up and they sprinted to the airport to get ahead. And we later, pressed all kinds of charges again, and went after this guy in Europe because we found out later on he was involved in multiple scams and kickbacks, and he had been in the country for a long time. He had lots of experience there, lots of knowledge of how things worked, and was able to, so despite the expat package, he was taking advantage of the situation going. And over the years, I've interviewed most of the people that we've caught in theft. I've interviewed them, and I tell people it's always very interesting. No one will sit in front of you and say, boss, I'm just a thief. I want things. No one says that. They all say the same thing. They justify it somehow. They say to me, like, I had a woman in Latvia once tell me, I said, we caught her in a huge $1 million plus fraud with P&G. And I had her sitting down, and it was one of the scariest moments of my entire career because She was this beautiful little Latvian girl, like our first employee in the company, you know, sweet. She had like these Audrey Hepburn doe eyes. And she looked, and the whole time she kept saying to us, you know, we were pounding on her, the auditors were pounding on her, you must have known, you must have known. And she was saying, it's not, I didn't know, I made a mistake, fire me, I made an error, but I didn't take anything, and blah, blah, blah. Because the companies that she was paying, we went to the addresses, they were like a cornfield. There, you know, there was no business there. It was a made-up business with a made-up address. And so she was getting 3 bids from 3 fictitious companies and then paying someone for a service that was never done and doing all of it. Now, we're pounding on her. They're interviewing her and like, you must have known. And she was just very good. She's saying, I didn't. She was crying and I didn't. And I thought this was getting out of hand. We got this little girl locked in a room and these men are Swiss, you know, auditors are pounding on desks. And I said, you guys go. And I sit down with her and I said, look, you got one last shot. Tell me the truth of this or I'm going to put you in jail. I got enough to put you in jail. And she looked at me and she said, can I smoke here? And I said, no, but go ahead. And she pulled out this cigarette, she lit this thing up. She takes a puff and she goes, okay, I'll tell you how it happened. And the eyes went black in front of my eyes. And she said, this is how I did it. And she was having an affair with this very important Latvian mafioso guy. And they cut this deal and she got, you know, $750,000 out of him, the whole bit. And she changed in front of me from this little doe-eyed Audrey Hepburn. She became this hardened, it was just transformative. And I was like literally shocked. And what did she say? I said, why did you do it? She said, why does anybody do it? She said, you guys should have promoted me more. I was pissed. She got angry. And she says, you know, I was the first employee and I saw these other people, but she didn't have a degree. So she was limited in her academic background to take bigger responsibilities. So she remained as like an admin. And then she saw other people come in and like get hired higher than her and make more. And she said, wait a minute, I'm not been treated fairly, so I'm going to equalize this. And I'm going to get what I deserve. And so she took 10 years of whatever missing that, you know, and it got justified. You don't have a person saying, I'm a thief. There's always a reason. There's always a reason for this. And I've interviewed dozens of fraud cases in corporate, the corporate world. No one has said I'm a thief or I have bigger tastes than I can. That has nothing to do with it. The company somehow, in their view, wronged them, and they're taking justice into their own hands, and they're going to right this thing. They don't believe in karma. They say, I'm going to make this thing work.
What was the impact financially for the company in Nigeria?
Well, the job was never completely done. It was always an ongoing process. What we were cleaning up and the signal it sent, because when you catch a big guy, you know, I did there were some people, there was a guy in Nigeria that everyone was terrified of. He was very powerful in his tribe and literally the last day when I was leaving, we had finally gotten enough to get rid of him. He was very clever and he was super senior high in the company. He was in the top 100 managers. So out of 6,000 people, he was in the top 100 people. He was intimidating, he was scary. Like when we tried to seize his computer, he told my department head, the IT manager, I'm not giving you my computer, and he walked out. And the IT manager comes to me and said he wouldn't give it to me. And I said, wait a minute, you're the department head. Go get the goddamn computer. And I had to yell. And so he was like terrified of this guy. So I went and I told the guy, I said, let me be clear. You got 5 seconds to give me your computer or you're fired on the spot. And he reached in his bag and pulled it out and kind of threw it at me and kept walking. You know, I mean, you got to be tough. The guy was very intimidating. I admit he was big physically and he was intimidating. When he knew we had him, but that was my last day in Coca-Cola and I was leaving the company. We called him in. I even told people, I will not leave this for my successor. I will do the dirty work. Because nobody wanted to do this. And I said, I'll do it. And we told him to come in. He said, my daughter's sick and blah, 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 whatever. So he thought he had dodged me because on the next day I was getting on a plane and never coming back. I called my boss and said, extend my contract one day. He said, fine, do it. We'd love to extend it for many years if you want. I said, I'm going back to the Philippines, but I'll stay for another day. I changed all the flights and I called him up and I said, let me be really clear. I'm still the CEO. If you're not at my office at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, consider yourself terminated for insubordination. I said, you got it? He goes, I got it. He showed up next morning all belligerent. I sat down and I said, you're gone. And you know why. And you're lucky I don't throw you in jail. I got enough to get you fired, but I probably don't have enough to prosecute you on fraud. And he started cussing up a storm. And I said, look, sign this, get the hell out of here. This is it. And I waited an extra day just to do it because I said, I still love this company, I still love these people, I don't want this kind of individual being in here influencing people, and having an impact, because my successor will say, let me delay it for 6 months or whatever. I'll do the dirty work to make this a better place for the future. And the P&L dramatically improved, but you don't know how much of that was just purely, but people see this, and when they saw him go down, I remember my logistics, because he was involved in a lot of logistics stuff and trucking companies. Like, he had his own trucking companies that he was then billing to Coca-Cola. It was a very clever thing. My transportation costs started plunging overnight. People got really scared. They said, wait a minute, I can't make any markup. They understand stuff. If they can get him, he's very powerful. If they can get that guy, they can get me, and our costs plunged. And I'd seen the same thing in Poland. I remember one time, it's a small example, but it's a meaningful example. You tell people, use the company phone for company expenses. Personal calls we don't cover, you should do that. We get a phone bill every month that ran like this, and we get some analysis, and we kept having these phone calls to India, and they were from different fax machines. And so somebody was like going from fax, and the calls were big, like $2,000 a month in phone calls to India. Wow. And so we had cameras up in the ceiling. The person didn't really notice, and we went and pulled the footage, and it was the same secretary moving phone to phone, and she was going to be marrying this Indian guy, and she was planning her wedding, and she was using a company phone. So I brought her and I said, this is wrong. She's like, yeah, I said, you're fine. And I'm sorry, but you were abusing it, and you were being devious, and you were switching phones, thinking you could stay ahead of us. This is devious, and you're out of here. And she said, I understand. She packed up and walked out. I remember the next month, my phone bill in the company was half the average month, and every month after that, it was half. Everybody in the company heard, oh my God. And they suddenly stopped calling their sister long distance, and they stopped calling, or they did it on their private cell phone. Like, why do I have two phones? This is my private, smart, I pay for this, and this is BAT. When I call my kids, I call on this. I keep things clean. What you get is people like saying, well, I can make a call on, this is where things get very dangerous. You gotta be ethically pure. The company's money is to be spent on company business. If you have personal things, you don't do. I used to tell people all the time, it made me laugh. Every year when I was in P&G here, my biggest month of usage of materials, like office materials, was in May, right before school starts. And people would just take all the pens, pencils, and say, now I can replenish my kids for school. And I say, no, I don't fill the storeroom with office supplies for back to school. It's for running this company. And now people say I'm the Grinch who stole Christmas, but it's a principle. And that's the foundation of any leader, is principles. The principle is the company's money must be spent, and you spend your own, it must be spent on the company's best interest. And we're not employing a warehouse full of pens, pencils, and paper that everybody takes home reams of it for their kids.
So even seemingly small things can still add up.
Absolutely. It's setting a small example. Just like small things that a hotel will do for you, seeing the little amenities on a tray, saying, wow, that's incredible. Little things matter. So these guys in this case, they basically they misrepresent, to get information, competitive information, saying, we're not going to do that. We're going to be better.
Does this also then have impact on things like showing up on time and producing reports when they said they would?
Yeah, but that might be less on integrity and more on discipline, which are two different things. Everything's linked, as you rightfully say, but I don't think that coming in 20 minutes late is an integrity issue. I think it's a discipline issue, and so the training would be different for that. What you would say that people would be different now. But I have a very young company here. It's impressionable. I'm trying to teach business ethics and integrity on many different fronts. If a person, like, we have display materials in stores. we hang up something. Now, my competitors have bigger sales forces than me because they're more established, and they can go and like tear my stuff down. And so you get these reports of, on this street, they tore all of our things down. And the natural reaction is revenge. So let's go tear down the street there. So when I say this is they have stepped into the gutter, but we do not. I'll take it up with them, but we're not going to behave that way. We'll be more, we will be the classy ones in this business. And then you're rewarded by that, by the customer. You're rewarded that by the consumer, by how you behave.
Sure.
And I think I'm proud to say, even in a competitive and a controversial industry like tobacco, very few people would doubt that, and not say that BAT has behaved beyond board and respect. We pay our taxes. We're honest to the government. We even caught a mistake from the BIR where they didn't ask us for enough money, and we went and told them and paid them more. When I think many companies would say, oh, they missed it, great, it's our windfall. We said, we made a mistake and we owe you more. Because this is about integrity.
How would you sum up in maybe a sentence or two the impact of integrity from your past experience?
For me, the essence of integrity is trying to do the right thing. That's the essence of it, of having good integrity, is you try to do the right thing. Not always successful, but you try. When you do that, people inherently trust you because they know that your motives are pure and clean. There's no room for an agenda when you're trying to do the right thing. There's no room for politics when you're trying to do the right thing. And then that's the essence of leadership. You have books written on the leadership at the speed of trust.
Yes.
And it's a good book, but it's the same thing for 300 pages. It's basically, if people trust you, they'll follow you. And then that's the essence of it. That's why, for me, integrity is the backbone of leadership. You can't be morally corrupt in leading.
Well, Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you sharing here some very intimate details, and I appreciate your authenticity on the subject. Obviously, you're the man to go to, and there is no integrity in place. I'm sure people may reach out to you, seeing maybe this video or reading in the book about what you've done, and I wish you all the best in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
You.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.